So, are you DTFF?
Once again, here's Drinking and Talking Fantasy Football with your host, Jake Trowbridge and Dustin Lunt.
Hey, welcome back to DTFF, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Hopefully y'all made it through week one without any issues, no injuries to your teams, although I'm sure we had plenty to talk about here. But hey, it's week one, it's football, it's wild, and we're back, and I love every fucking second of it. I am so happy to be here on this side of week one, and we just, all the reactions. I love it. I love it. Been waiting, 8 months for this now? Like, so excited. But how are you doing, Jake? Are you as excited as I am for this?
I thought I was until I heard exactly how excited you were just now. I am very excited though, and we of course were whooping it up on Sunday, watching 7 hours of uninterrupted football on Red Zone before our beloved Packers kicked off, and every part of it was phenomenal. So yes, I'm excited for the week that we got. I'm even more excited for the weeks that we still get. And I can't wait to be at a position in January where we'll gripe about it. It's going to come faster than we want it to.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it was a very wild week one, and we are going to talk about some of those overarching stories. Are we overreacting? Are we reacting appropriately or underreacting? So that's the focus for this evening. But before we get into all that, and I want to hit a couple news highlights here. But Jake, before we do, what are you drinking this evening?
I'm drinking the same thing I was drinking this weekend from Delta Beer Lab. Have an Oktoberfest. It's the time of the season for Oktoberfest. That's how the song goes. Yeah, it's delightful. It's now the weather is cooperating. It was a little too sunny for me to actually feel comfortable drinking an Oktoberfest this weekend, but I did it anyways because they're so damn good. But now it's like the dreary autumn that I need as my background for the beer. But what are you enjoying?
I just have my my Mexican lager homebrew. I love how crystal clear it is dropped. Over time, it's become more and more clear, which is what you want out of a lager, and it's crystal clear. I love it. But yeah, enjoying a nice easy lager this evening.
Easy drinker. You put a little lime in that guy?
Nope,
you ever
just
put
as
a little
is.
lime in him?
Have I?
Just as is?
Have I? Yes, but no. Typically, I don't.
Not tonight. Not tonight, damn it. All right.
But as I said, let's talk a little bit of news. We're not going to get into it too deep and go into like every single news brief or injury report or anything like that. That's not us.
What are we, newscasters? What are we, journalists here? Jeez.
No, but I think the big story that we want to talk about is Mr. Aaron. Played all of 75 seconds, 4 snaps last night, tore his Achilles. And it wasn't even like he was just trying to escape a defender. It's not like he was, got rolled up on, or, it wasn't anything crazy, just a very routine play. Obviously he probably wasn't your number one quarterback, just from where he was being drafted this year. But definitely has fantasy impact for Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, Allen Lazard, Dalvin Cook, a lot of fantasy impact there. So how do you think this changes for those like main players, Jake?
It puts me on red alert to trade away Garrett Wilson, because I think maybe you can in your league, because if people just saw, or if they didn't watch the game and they just saw the stat line was reasonable. It was just because of this ridiculous catch that the ball should have never been thrown by Zach Wilson anyways. And Garrett Wilson did a miracle, just an actual magic trick in midair to catch this ball. So like if they're seeing that, maybe they're still on the Garrett Wilson train.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd be trying to trade him away if you could. Like your best case scenario is that they trade for Jameis Winston or something. That's basically what you're hoping for with the Jets. Because if it's Zach Wilson the rest of the way, we saw that last year. We know what that does for Garrett Wilson's fantasy value. So outside of him, though, I don't think it moves the other guy's needle too much, except for like maybe there is a week or two you could get away with starting Randall Cobb. Now don't even bother with even trying to guess that. Alan Lazard, I think, stays the same, though. Do you see the running backs as having crazy shifts in value after this?
I think their value goes up, but I'm also pumping the brakes a little bit because teams are not scared of Zach Wilson. Let's be honest. So in obvious running situations, teams are going to stack the box, and they're going to force the Jets to throw the ball. So from that aspect, it worries me a little bit. Like I said, pump the brakes a little bit, but I mean, that Breece Hall, he looked great this weekend. I know he tore off that big run.
Multiple. Ridiculous.
Stats, but looked explosive, looked like he's back from injury. And if you're able to get him a little bit later in your drafts, it's definitely going to pay off this year. But I think for both those running backs, the volume is definitely going to be there. They're going to try to pound the ball, I think, not have to rely on Zach Wilson throwing the ball all that much. So they should get the volume. I'm sure there'll be a split in there too. But I would try to go after Breece Hall, especially if you can. Just there might be some weeks where it's going to be a little bit rough because, like I said, they're going to end up stacking the box against them.
Yeah. Breece Hall should be fine. I have to eat a little bit of crow with Breece Hall. I was like, Dalvin Cook is going to be their guy and their only guy for the first 3 weeks and ease Breece Hall back into action. They didn't do that. At all. So yeah, congratulations, Breece Hall managers, on that. Less congratulations to J.K. Dobbins managers. He's done for this year again, it looks like, and that's a tough spot. Do you have
Toronto
a guy? Dave. Hey, Toronto Dave in the chat. Cheers to you, sir. Do you have a running back in Baltimore that you're at all interested in, by the way, after this?
Not really. I think it's going to be a split backfield. They're not going to rely on one guy. And I just want to say, this one really bums me out because I was really excited to see Dobbins come back a year removed from his previous injury. I thought he looked explosive early on and, in the preseason and everything. So I was really excited with the value that you got from him. I got him in a couple other leagues. So that's a kind of a sad situation there for me personally, along with all the other millions of fantasy players out there. Obviously, it's not just about
and
me.
Him. Yeah.
And him.
You're the one we should be thinking about right now.
That's right. But yeah, getting back to your question, I think it's going to be a split backfield. They're going to use both Gus and Justice Hill. Unless you see in the next couple weeks one of those guys really get a bulk of the carries, I just don't trust either one of them right now. They'll both have their value and they'll both have their weeks, I'm sure, but I just, at this point, I'm not going to plant my flag on one guy because I just don't know who it's going to be.
Yeah, it's probably not Melvin Gordon is my guess, but who even knows? It could be Melvin Gordon, and I don't like that. Or it could be a suitor to be named yet. I hear that Leonard Fournette and Kareem Hunt are still out there looking for work. By the way, seems like a reasonable spot for them to land. I also saw somebody float out the idea of them trading for Derrick Henry, which would be very exciting, but I don't know how plausible that is. But
or like,
your point,
or would like JT fall into this category? Maybe.
And
I don't know.
Maybe it's possible.
That doesn't seem like a move that Baltimore would make. But you never know. That would be a fun offense to see, though, with JT there. Oof, that'd be fun.
Yes, indeed. We'll see. We'll see the likelihood.
Yeah. Any other news bites you want to talk about, Jake?
Not really. I do just want to briefly, though, say, Jordan Love, thank you for giving me just a little bit of confidence for these Packers coming in. We're not going to chortle too much. It's one game, but it was an important game against a
That's
division
right.
rival in their home turf, on their home turf. So
Yep.
it was nice to see, because we said we have no expectations for this year, but it's nice to have that level of payout early on in the season.
It is. Speaking of that, Aaron Jones tweaked a hamstring. Looks like he's going to be out 2 to 3 weeks at least. So AJ Dillon wheels up, hopefully. But yeah, it was nice to see they got some help from the defense. But we're not here to talk about the Packers game. And we could do that all night long. Let's be honest. But let's move on. Let's get into something fun here. We got some beer bet payouts. We had 2 beer bets from last week. One was our weekly beer bet that we do every single show. And the second one we did because we were going against each other, mano a mano, in our home league week 1. So we went 1-1 on these bets. And, the first one, our weekly bet, I even hate to say that you won this one because it was so fucking bad.
I love it.
It was so fucking bad. It makes me so angry that it was one, such a poor showing by both quarterbacks, and 2, that you won by such a slim margin when they were both so poor. So the first one, just to remind folks, I said Sunday night game, you got Daniel Jones versus Dak Prescott, PPR, just straight points for the game. You took you took Daniel Jones. I'm sorry. I keep hoping you switched to Dak magically, but no, that didn't happen.
Still the same.
So yeah, you had Daniel Jones. He had 6.5 fantasy points last night. 6.5. That's awful. But not as awful as Dak with 6.3. Ugh.
That's the mark of a shark right here. This is the shark right here, making that choice, that hard choice between these 2 fantasy players. What a fucking disgusting resolution to it. But hey, look, I'm still happy that I came out with the right guy for our bet.
I feel like it's only because they pulled Dak so early. If they would have kept him in one more series, I would have had this. But
yeah, that's true.
That's fine. So Jake, as we want to do on this podcast, congratulations. You are an amazing fantasy football analyst / genius. Cheers, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I'm going to take just a small moment to soak it in before it's my turn to turn around and invite one out.
Yeah, give me a small moment to soak in all that fireball too. Woo!
Yeah.
It's good stuff. So, do you want to give the listeners the update for our head-to-head?
Yeah, I'll do it. This is gross, man. This is, gross for me. Not at all gross for you. So we faced each other in our home league in week 1. It was perfect timing. I love coming out of the gates with that. A lot of trash talk on Sunday. Well, for like 10 minutes. A lot of trash talk on Sunday before stuff went sour for me. So in our home league, Dustin finished with a mighty 146.4 points. It's very good. It's very good. I finished with a less mighty 85.6 points. You got me, but you only got me by like 60.
Yeah, only.
Which is really, what are you even doing? You should have had me by twice that. It was great. I benched my highest scoring player in Brandon Ayuk, who had like 36 points just sitting there on my bench with 2 nice touchdowns.
That was fun to watch that, the highlights of that as before the Packer game started. Just watching them rack up those points. It was a beautiful sight to behold.
So rough. It's like, oh, there's my guy on red zone. Oh, there's my guy on red zone again. That's not good. Where he's positioned. Everybody in my lineup was just terrible. Lamar Jackson was the most egregious with -3 something points. Our league is very favorable or very unfavorable towards the quarterback position. And it was unfavorable this time. So, Dustin, I actually forgot that I have to pay this off. So what I'm going to do is an old school payout. I'm going to be doing a little chug-a-lug for basically all of this goddamn Oktoberfest because I wasn't smart enough to bring up a beverage besides this. So with that said, you are an amazing fantasy football prognosticator / genius. There we
Thank
go.
you. While you're finishing that, Toronto Dave in the chat says he said Ayuk for Goddard as well, and he wasn't even drinking. So there is some shared tears there.
Woo! I love Oktoberfest. Not a chugging beer, though. I will say, not a chugging beer in my estimation. Holy shit. Next time, I'll remember my little mini bump because I don't want to repeat that. My goodness. Well, at least I have some company with Dave. I appreciate
that. Is that's going back to our old school days when we first started the podcast of Paying Off Bets.
Going back to roots.
Tall boy chugging beers. Oof.
Yeah.
Glad we don't do that anymore.
By the way, I love this comment from Joey. This was for yours, by the way. What is that? A beer for ants? He was talking about your fireball, your little mini fireball. Joey, welcome in, by the way. Love the active chat as always. We'll be here paying off these dumbass bets throughout the season. Not always the head-to-head ones, but the other ones that we make.
That's right. Okay, Jake, should we move on and do our drunk trade of the week here?
Bingo bango.
Drunk, hammered drunk.
Drunk trade of the week.
You know what pisses me off, by the way? Now I realize I don't have a beer for the rest of the show. God, that's 2 ways that screwed me back to back. Anyways, our drunk trade this week comes from Twitter at the FFB Tech. Drinking and trading can be dangerous, and yet here I am again, they say. So we got tagged in this one on Twitter. Much appreciate the tag. Heads up to anybody out there who is posting these on Twitter. Do give us a tag. This is a 12-team Dynasty Superflex PPR League. Here's how it went down. Kenneth Walker, the third, on one side versus Deontay Johnson and a second on the other. Keep in mind, the date on this is very crucial. This was posted on the 29th of August. All right, so we are a little slow to get to this one. I apologize, KJ. But with the benefit of hindsight, as we now have a week and a half beyond this, Deontay Johnson, we didn't talk about it at the top of the show, but is dealing with his own injury that's going to keep him sidelined for at least, I think, 3 to 4 weeks is what their guesstimation is at this point. So it's dynasty, though. It's not the end of the world. What do you think? By the way, KJ was the Deontay Johnson side. Had clarified in a further tweet that his love for Deontay Johnson might have clouded him as he was also drinking during this. But what do you think about this one?
I am with KJ here. I am Deontay Stan this season. 1 week does not make a season, as we will kind of be talking about later. But yeah, give me the Deontay Johnson and a second. Pete Carroll and his running backs, he never likes to have like the guy ever since Mr. Skittles left the team. So I just I just don't trust it. And Kenneth Walker, had his little tweak of an injury during the preseason. So could that flare up at some point? Sure. Not that I want to bank on that, but especially in Dynasty, give me the young wide receiver that is a target hog plus the pick. Yeah,
Deontay Johnson is still young. What's he, 26? I think this year is, and you get that second round pick. I'm also with you. After the injury and all, I don't care. It's Dynasty. It stinks if you're a contender, obviously, and you're hoping for Deontay Johnson to be contributing in that way. But again, it's 4 weeks, I think, is what they're saying. So you can get away with this. And I agree with you. I think that Zach Charbonnet could be making an imprint on this offense still sooner than later. So I don't hate Kenneth Walker, but yeah, give me the Deontay Johnson plus pick side. If this was just players for players straight up, I think I'd have a much harder time with it because I do think that they're pretty even. But with the second round pick on top of that, I'm comfortable with it.
Yeah, we are lockstep on this one, Jake, 100%.
Look at us in full agreement on a drunk trade that the submitter was not even fully confident in. So look at us giving them that hope
That's
KJ,
right.
hopefully that makes you sleep a little bit better tonight.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's get into our main event here, Jake. Week 1 reaction, overreactions, underreactions, all the actions this week.
That's right.
These are like we have a few just main things we're going to talk about here, main storylines. Are we overreacting to this, or is this more of like a season-long concern that maybe we have to pay attention to help your fantasy team? So, Jake, why don't you start us off here?
I'd be happy to. And grossed out too. Because I'm going to be starting with the Chiefs wide receivers. We can't trust any of those guys. We all scream in unison after watching Thursday Night Football and the very bizarre game that was without Travis Kelce against the Detroit Lions. Of course, with Travis Kelce out, the common thought process was, we'll see which of these wide receivers steps up and basically becomes Patrick Mahomes' go-to guy. And maybe Noah Gray gets involved as well. That's kind of a secondary hope for the backup tight end. But really what we ended up seeing was a ton of drops from the presumed number one guy who did seem to be targeted in the, if not the most overall, was targeted in the most impactful situations, which was Kadarius Toney. But Kadarius Toney ended up giving away a lot of points. He ended up having one plop right off of his hands. That's the noise it made.
Yep. Apparently he was taking pointers this offseason from MVS on how to catch the ball.
Rude. MVS actually caught his one.
I know, but
like
it's a low hanging fruit. I can't help it.
It is. It is. That's old school MVS. Yeah, new school MVS. He only gets one target, but damn, does he make?
He made it look good. Yeah, that's right.
He did. He did. But yeah, so between the lack of involvement from Justin Ross, which I was just very sad about. I've been wanting the most for him. Really, the best looking guy out there in your stat lines for fantasy was Rashee Rice, and that's because he caught a touchdown. And if it wasn't for that, it would be even more of a red alert situation for everybody in fantasy right now. So is this an overreaction to say we're out on all of the Chiefs wide receivers? I would say yes and no. If you agreed with us coming into this season, we were not specifically targeting any Chiefs wide receiver a little bit for this reason. So I don't want to pat ourselves on the back here too much, but the idea was, yes, Travis Kelce is obviously the number one target. Most things are going to go to him. But beyond that, who does it go to? We don't know, and we still don't know, I don't believe, after this game. If I had to guess, Kadarius Toney gets a chance to reprove himself. Because, again, he looked for him often. He looked for him in those very stressful, high-impact situations. If he can get a hold of his drops and his health for while he's out there, Kadarius Toney could be the number one guy. With that said, no, I'm not going into my weekly lineups targeting a specific wide receiver. Sky Moore, of course, is probably the most egregious example of somebody's value just dropping like an absolute atom bomb. And that's what happened for Sky Moore because he ended up, I think, with like 0.4 points in our league. It was gross. It was very gross. So if you believed in a specific Chiefs wide receiver, then continue, I guess, to believe in them if you want. But if you were like us and were just out at them, except for whoever the cheapest guy was, hold on to that cheapest guy, and maybe Justin Ross makes his way back into the lineups going forward. But yeah, I think it's okay to react to this one appropriately and say, I'm not going to start anybody until they show me something.
Yeah. And I think this just proves, one, that Travis Kelce is hashtag good at football, but two, having him on the field also opens up the defense for the other wide receivers to get open where, you know, they focus on Kelce so much, it makes the little bit lighter coverages. So without him out there, it's going to be interesting to see how this offense adjusts to that, you know, the new world Kelce. And let's get honest, he's getting older, and this, in the next few years, they're going to have to envision life without him. So maybe this is just a precursor to that. Just one quick aside. I was speaking to our commish at bowling on Thursday. I know you could get more Wisconsin than that, but I was saying to him, I'm like, I can just imagine what Chris Collinsworth is saying right now during this game. He's like, if you would have told me that a Patrick Mahomes led Chiefs would be trailing to the Lions even without Travis Kelce in the lineup, I wouldn't have bet in a million years that this would have, even been remotely possible.
And then he slides out of frame just
yeah,
because
exactly.
he can.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh God, I love it. All right, well, what's your next overreaction you want to talk about?
So this is a positive. We're not going to be all negative here. This is a positive.
Right.
Calvin Ridley, amazing game. Can we trust this moving forward? Do we love him in this Jags offense? What are the expectations? Because what we were watching the game, he had a career high 7 catches in the first half. Career high receptions in the first half of this game. He balled out, and I will take the L right now. He looked fucking amazing. Like, he looked like Calvin Ridley of old. Looked like he stayed in shape, studying that football hard while he was out for that almost year and a half. Looks like he's got his head on right in the playbook, and looks like he's going to be super involved in this offense. Do we think this? I mean, I'm all in. I'll admit, after week 1, okay. I will overreact and say yes. Are there going to be down weeks? Of course, yes. That's bound to happen for any player in the NFL, a la Patrick Mahomes week 1. But yeah, I think they showed that he is going to be an integral part of this offense. And Christian Kirk was nowhere to be found. Zay Jones was the number 2 option on this team, which that's a bigger concern for me than anything else. It's like, okay, we kind of knew Calvin Ridley, he was getting drafted high. We kind of figured he'd be the number 1 option on this offense. But I don't know about you, but I still thought Christian Kirk was going to be readily involved, like a solid number 2 wide receiver. Didn't see that. So that's kind of the bigger overreaction for me is Christian Kirk. But I am all on board with Calvin Ridley being back. As long as he's on the field and healthy, I think he's going to continue to get fed the ball because he showed what he can do.
Yeah, I will absolutely take the massive L. I'll go even further. I was telling people to wait to draft Christian Kirk later in their drafts instead of taking Calvin Ridley where he was going. That looks dumb as shit right now. So we'll see. Maybe it's a little take lock on my part. I'm still going to wait to see if this was just Trevor Lawrence. Like, let's get my guy on my page with me week 1. Let's just hyper target him and get him super comfortable coming back. Maybe you see things like that happen sometimes in the NFL. I think it's a legitimate process for them to do if that's what Trevor Lawrence was actually doing. I do think, if we look back to when Calvin Ridley was the Calvin Ridley, even then he had some games where he kind of goosed you. He had some single-digit performances, even in his best year, where he was the wide receiver 5 on the season. So there's going to be ebbs and flows with this, but I am eating a bunch of crow. I think Calvin Ridley, I think he's back. I think he's very back.
Yeah, public apology. Sorry, Calvin.
Yep. You will get my letter in the mail. I will sign it with my tears. Next, I want to talk about the Lions backfield. David Montgomery. This damn guy is going to ruin Jahmyr Gibbs' value, right? We saw it on Thursday night. We've been talking about it coming into the season. Lions wanted a workhorse, and they went out and got one in David Montgomery, and then they said, Jahmyr Gibbs, we'll give you a couple targets here and there. Yes, sir. I believe you have a question.
Jake, but what about what the coaches said, that this was by design and they're going to get him more involved, in the coming weeks? This was the plan the whole way along.
I'm glad you asked that question. Thank you so much.
I'll hang up and hold for a response.
What we get from Dan Campbell on the week-to-week, by the way, is never going to be anything that is, how do I want to phrase this? Too unassuming. Everything that comes out of Dan Campbell's mouth is going to be very purposeful. and intense because that's the kind of guy that he is. And when they say things like, we meant for Jahmyr Gibbs to only get this going forward, you can read that one of two ways. I'm choosing to read that as this very intense coach who knows a lot of football saying, yeah, we know what he is. That's what you get. That's the possibility coming out of this. It doesn't mean, oh, we meant to ease him in. It means, yeah, I mean, David Montgomery, we love him. And Jahmyr Gibbs, you be happy with your 10 touches per game. And that very well could be the case. Again, I do not want to pat myself on the back too much. I can't even reach back there these days. But I did say specifically coming into this season, like, David Montgomery is a workhorse for a reason. That's what they used Jamal Williams with. If it is the Jamal Williams versus DeAndre Swift type of split, this is what you should expect. Now, with that said, I have to admit Jahmyr Gibbs looked way better than I thought he would this early on in the season. So even if the guy gets 10 touches a game, he's going to maximize the shit out of those touches. He should have had a touchdown. And your stat line, by the way, would have looked a lot better. He slipped a little bit there as they got, I think it was like from the 15 or 10. He had a clear path to the end zone. Nobody would be having these meltdowns over Jahmyr Gibbs if he had just scored that touchdown, and the stat line looks a lot plumper. So, yeah, maybe this is the way of the world. Maybe David Montgomery is the 20-touch guy. Jahmyr Gibbs is the 10-touch guy. But if he continues looking like he did on Thursday night, you still don't have an issue. You're still going to be looking at a volatile but nice-looking running back two, at least for your season.
Unfortunately, though, that's probably not where you drafted him as. You probably drafted him as your running back one, depending on how you go.
A little later. He was in the third round. You could have, gotten him as your RB2, which is where he should.
If you went RB heavy, yes. But yeah, if he's your RB1, it's a little bit dicier. But I agree with you 100% here. I think this is going to be what it is. He's going to give you those explosive games. But week to week, you're not going to get a lot of consistency at this point, unless something drastic changes. But we had all of last season to see what the Lions wanted, how they want to use their running backs. And it just continued on in week one this year with just a different set of guys. So I don't see that changing, like I said, unless something drastic changes, injury to Montgomery or something like that. So, yeah, moving on.
Moving on, indeed.
Indianapolis. Let's talk Colts here. Anthony Richardson, he looked okay for his first week. He had some very good highlights. Again, he's got his own little hamstring tweak. Should be able to play this week. It didn't sound too serious, but could be a little bit hampered. But he looked good. Supported his fantasy assets well. Do we trust this? That's the big thing. It's like, I don't know that I do. I'll be honest. I'm still out on this one. I'm really interested to hear what you think. But, I mean, I like that he supported Pittman. That was good to see. The running game didn't really give a whole lot of support, which isn't overly surprising, just considering it's not JT. But, overall, for the very first outing, he looked okay, which gives me hope for the future. I don't know that I can trust him yet. And if he was my QB2 on a team, I probably wouldn't be starting him at this point, given matchups and, assuming my quarterback one is much better than him. And I drafted like Joe Burrow, who will be getting around to here in a little bit. Spoiler, but maybe not one of the top three like game-changing quarterbacks, but still a solid QB1. I still don't know if I could play matchups and trust Anthony Richardson at this point, given what we saw here in week one. So what do you think, Jake?
I'll be honest. I feel the exact opposite. I feel like this is a guy that you can look at and go, what defense is he playing? Okay, great. I have an idea of what I should expect for him in fantasy, which is not what I expected to be able to say right now, because I was mostly impressed just with how accurate he actually was. Like, that was the big knock on him coming in. Is like, the first 5 games of the season, like, just expect, 100 yards rushing, but like 50 yards passing, like the Malik Willis treatment was being thrust on him, which was unfair. And obviously in hindsight looks even worse because he really did look good. I think he had like 25 of 37 or something was his passing line, and he was spreading the ball around. And I just thought he looked comfortable. He looked very comfortable passing the ball. It sucks that he's dealing with this injury, because looking ahead at his schedule, he's got Houston next week. That feels like a smash start to me against Houston, where he's not going to be asked. He's not going to be put so far behind in the game script where he's just going to have to sling it constantly. He should be able to keep kind of a nice balance here if he plays against Houston. There are other matchups down the road where I would probably avoid him. Like when he plays against Tennessee in week 5, that's probably a matchup, unless he's come a long way even since then.
Right.
I'd probably sit him. That defense isn't anything to mess around with. So I do think, though, that you can pretty much scout mostly the rest of the way. All right, let's say that your main quarterback, what's a real sturdy guy? Let's say it's Trevor Lawrence. Say your main guy is Trevor Lawrence and you have Anthony Richardson as your backup. I feel pretty confident that I could go, all right, this one, the matchup's so juicy for Anthony Richardson that the ceiling is much higher than it is for Trevor Lawrence, even after what we saw in week 1. So we have different perspectives on the offense, I think, for sure. For the wide receivers, admittedly, I'm less inclined to just be like, Michael Pittman's an auto start.
Right. Yeah. I agree with you there. Yeah. What about, say, we'll fast forward here 4 more weeks and JT comes back in week 5, say he's healthy. Does this even more then make it like, yes, that's going to open up this offense even more, and Richardson becomes even more of like a just, play the matchup and really just cut her loose?
I think so, because I think rushing quarterbacks can sometimes be to the detriment of the actual running back, but vice versa is almost never the case. Like a good solid running back there. I mean, obviously, the more that you have a consistent backfield, the more scoring opportunities you should also have, and it should be easier to move the thing down the damn field. So I think Jonathan Taylor helps Anthony Richardson overall when and if he comes back.
Okay. What do you got for your last one here, Jake?
Well, let's talk about it. It's awkward. Nobody saw this coming, but the Bengals offense was a poopy, a fantasy disaster, you might even say. And I would say that. Most people who watch would say that.
You didn't even get the blow-up barrier in your diaper for this one. It was so bad.
It like came up, I don't know, it came up your back, I think a little bit for sure. The Bengals offense, there was no good part of this. There was no good part of this offense. Maybe, I guess because of all of the injuries and stuff happening at running back, maybe you were fine with Joe Mixon. Maybe you said, I'll take my 10 points from Joe Mixon and see you later. Like that was enough to get me my victory. If so, fine. But Joe Burrow, look, I know he was coming back from an injury. I get it. The calf was a big thing, but the fact that they were rolling him out in week 1 suggested like it's not going to be any issue. And yet, this man could not throw for 100 yards. It was sloppy field conditions, admittedly,
very rainy.
A Browns team where these two teams do just have slobber knockers, to borrow a wrestling term. They really do throw down heavily, and it does always seem to be ugly games when these two teams play. So maybe all of those factors together can account for how poopy these fantasy stats were. Do we have real issues with Joe Burrow, with Jamar Chase, with T. Higgins moving forward? I do not. I do not have any damn issues. If you're tempted to sit any one of those players in week 2, I would strongly suggest you reconsider. Put them all back into your lineups. You're going to feel so gross when Higgins and Chase both have a touchdown, maybe even a couple, like Brandon Ayuk did. And when Joe Burrow is just going off in week 2.
Yep.
They
And
get a matchup against Baltimore that's going to be a lot more forgiving for them. Not saying it's going to be a cakewalk by any means, but you don't sit your studs after one gross performance when they, had to get kind of eased in.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And this is the perfect opportunity. Maybe go try to trade for Chase or for Higgins or for Burrow. If their fantasy manager is down on them after this week and just thinks like, oh my God, wheels fell off. No, the ship will right itself. Just give it some time, and maybe take advantage. Go make a trade and get a couple of studs on your team if you're able to.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better. Wouldn't have.
Thanks. All right. Finally, here. And this, I don't want to end on this one, but
What were we thinking?
well, I know. Arthur Smith, man, he is not fucking kidding when he says he doesn't care about our fantasy teams. He doesn't like wide receivers, I don't think, at all. Anyone that has to catch the ball or throw the ball. Basically, he just likes running backs and probably offensive linemen, and that's it. Because, yeah, the running backs, they were fed often. And with Bijan and Algier, they both were just super fantasy relevant, had great games. And the 2 top 5 picks in the last 2 drafts for the Falcons, and Kyle Pitts and Drake London, had a combined 0 receptions, I believe, on like 5 targets. I know Drake London had 1 target the entire game. Desmond Ridder has more receptions than either of those combined after week 1. That's fucking scary. And I feel like reacting appropriately. I don't feel like this is overreaction, but I'm glad I don't have either of them on my fantasy roster. I wish I had either Bijan or Algier, because I feel like both of them are going to be fantasy relevant every single week. Obviously, they can't just. Well, I shouldn't say that. I refuse. I can't even say it. I was going to say there's going to be weeks where they have to throw the ball, but no, I don't think that's true. I think Arthur Smith will run the ball no matter what, and it won't matter. Game script be damned. He's going to run the ball. And I was really high on Drake London going into this year. I really thought where he was being drafted, it was going to be great value. And I'm probably going to be wrong on that. Like, he's just like, Arthur Smith just does not like wide receivers. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what else to say. Like, it's just I would try to get rid of them if you can, because it's just, if they do pop off, you're not going to know the week when it's going to happen. And I just don't want that sort of volatility at a point in the draft where I had to draft them somewhat high yet. I mean, it wasn't going super high like Kyle Pitts was last year. It was like 3rd round, but I mean, you still spent decent draft capital on both of these guys. So if there's any way that you can find a believer in your league to trade them to, get something has a little bit more consistency in return, I would definitely try to do that.
I think what pisses me off the most about this is that the Falcons won. Like, they did this and they win. So Arthur Smith, there's not even the chance that he reflects and goes, maybe I should throw this ball to like a couple of these guys every once in a while. There's no reason. He won the game. That's all he gives a shit about. And so even if he loses the next 3, he's going to default back to this week 1 and be like, well, I know it worked that time. Maybe I'll try it again still. And it does suck. For Dynasty, I'll send out a trade offer for Drake London. I will, because my hope is Arthur Smith gets fired after this season and the coaching staff can utilize that talent. Same with Kyle Pitts. Like, go. I'm fine trading for them in Dynasty if you can get a deal for them.
What are you willing to give up for them?
Well, I'll tell you. I actually sent out an offer before we went on the show for Drake London, and a lot of pieces involved. But basically, to sum it up, Mike Williams, Isaiah Pacheco, and Russell Wilson got sent away for Drake London and some throw-in quarterback. It was like Will Levis maybe, or Malik Will, somebody who's basically just a throw-in. Like, I'm fine doing that. Like, it's a super flex league, so it's 3 quarters, maybe make $1. But if that dollar has Arthur Smith holding on to it, maybe you're comfortable letting go.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
See. We shall
Okay.
see.
Any other overreactions you want to talk about here before we move on?
No,
Looking forward.
Everybody should overreact to everything else. Everything that we didn't talk about, you go ahead. You overreact to your heart's content.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, then let's move ahead. Week 2 here. Any games on the slate that you are particularly think they're juicy fantasy matchups?
Yeah, there's actually quite a few this week that I will say get my heat up. That's a gross question. That's a gross way to phrase it. The Vikings and the Eagles. I'm very interested in Thursday night football this week. I'm glad that we actually have a fairly decent slate for Thursday night football. I think most of the way, I don't think there should be too many gripes from people about like the disgusting matchups that are ahead. That one really sticks out to me. Those receivers obviously are just going to be so damn exciting to watch. But I'm also excited for a Sunday noon matchup here with the Seahawks and the Lions. I want to know more about both of those backfields. We talked about both of those backfields already. That's probably why I'm so latched on, but I'm just really curious. Are they going to be the driving forces in this game, or are Geno Smith and Jared Goff actually going to open shit up? Neither one really was afforded the opportunity to in week 1, so maybe that changes. I'm pretty interested in that. What do you see on this slate that's interesting?
Yeah, I'm interested in another noon game here. It's the Chiefs-Jags. Will the Chiefs and all their offensive pieces rebound going against another high-powered offense in the Jags? Will they continue against a decent Chiefs defense here? Very interested in that one. Lots of fantasy pieces involved. And then, I gotta say, team we just talked about with Atlanta going against our Packers, both teams looked really good in week 1. Put up good fantasy stats for your players. Is this going to continue? So it'll be interesting to see how those two young teams continue on and how they match up against each other here in week 2.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously, we're still just excited for football in general.
Yeah, absolutely.
All of these games will have their merit. Don't get me wrong, but yeah, I'm pretty interested in that. Yeah, Monday night, we'll see. Steelers and Browns should make for an interesting debacle of a game. It's probably the one I'm least excited about for fantasy because again, I think it's gonna be like Browns versus Bengals, a little bit repeated, but kind of on both sides of the ball. So I don't want any players starting from those games.
No, absolutely. Okay, Jake, and then we'll get into our starts of the week here for week 2. But looking back at last week, Jake, you had Kenneth Walker going against the Rams. 10.7 points. Okay, nothing great. Ended as RB25.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
He got the work, and that was the accurate part of it, but the efficiency was not there, and there just wasn't much work to be given all around in this game. Very odd game.
Yep. And then I had Jordan Addison versus Tampa Bay, 16.1 points coming in at wide receiver 18. I am very happy about that. That is a solid finish. Scored the touchdown, which was nice. I had a couple other big plays. I know at least one other time we were watching on Red Zone, so we only got to see bits and pieces of this game. I know he was targeted at least one other time in the end zone when the Vikings were down there. So definitely someone they're looking at. Definitely if he's on your roster, don't be afraid to start him. Maybe depending on matchup. Maybe it's not an every week start quite at this point, but you should feel good about having him on your team. So moving forward then, looking ahead week 2, Jake, who is your start of the week?
Well, I'll be honest. This guy was almost my start of the week last week until I looked deeper into his matchup and I pivoted away. But this week, I'm going to Jamal Williams,
the mermaid
lead
himself.
running back for the Saints, who is going up against the Carolina Panthers. Could not be two more different defenses for a running back to face in back-to-back weeks. The Tennessee Titans allowed the fewest rushing yards all of 2022. There's no reason to think that they had fallen off to the point that it was going to be easy for him last week, but he did get a ton of work last week. He was the guy last week. However, the Saints were airing it out a little bit more, I think, than people expected them to. So out of the running backs, which are very few and far between, Alvin Kamara still suspended for another couple of games. Kendre Miller still dealing with an issue that kept him out last week. We don't know his status for week 2. But even if Miller is out there and a go, I'm very comfortable rolling with Jamal Williams, who should have plenty of opportunities for touchdowns, if nothing else.
Yep, I like that call, Jake. And then I am taking Darren Waller going against the Cardinals. I know what you're thinking. The Cardinals, they, lost by a score. They sacked Sam Howell a bunch of times. They actually looked okay on defense. Slow down. It's the Washington offense. I mean,
Really?
and it's week 1. I mean, come on. And I know the Giants just got fucking boat raced on Sunday Night Football against Dallas. Conference game. I know the weather was shitty, but you would have expected it to be a bit more competitive than that, especially week 1. All the more reason to go after these Giants players this week. I think they're going to come out motivated after that embarrassment last week. And Darren Waller is the guy, the only guy I trust on this offense other than Saquon. So give me Darren Waller against the secondary. I think this offense as a whole is going to come back rejuvenated this week. And Darren Waller is going to be leading the way.
There was a time not so long ago, you started every tight end against the Arizona Cardinals in fantasy. Maybe Darren Waller helps get us back to that point, or at least gives us the illusion of it after he crushes this week and finishes as the tight end 1 overall.
That's right. That's right. Okay, Jake, we just have one little piece of business left on the show sheet here, and that is our weekly beer bet here. So it is your turn to provide the beer bet. So lay it on me. What are my choices?
Won't leave you in suspense any longer. This is a throwback a little bit to a variety of beer bet that we did pretty often last year in season. I'm not going 1 versus 1. I'm going position versus position. And I want to see it happen on Thursday night as we're at bowling so we can track it just a little bit and add to this. It's the Vikings versus the Eagles, but I'm talking running backs versus running backs. Now, there is a part of me that wanted to make this bet just Alexander Mattison versus Kenneth Gainwell, who was the surprise to a lot of people, number 1 running back in Philadelphia. People, we saw the depth chart come out initially, and we said they're fucking with us. They weren't fucking with us, apparently, at least not in week 1. But just in case they were, just in case week 1 is a little bit of a trick, I wanted to open this up for less trickery. So Vikings versus Eagles, which group do you want?
Give me the Eagles.
Done and done. I'll lock you up. You think they're just going to get out to such an early lead, especially, or what's your thought process there?
I just have a hard. I was really in on Madison early in the offseason once they cut Dalvin Cook. But since then, I've really started to fade him. And especially if the Eagles jump out to a big lead early on, Vikings are going to be playing from behind. Yeah, there might be opportunities for dump offs there, but they're going to be going for JJ and Addison. So it's just less opportunity for volume there in this game than I'd like to see. The Eagles backfield is a little bit more up in the air of who's going to get it. And I know Jalen Hurts could end up being the lead running back on the team. So there is that piece of it, but the Eagles are just a better team all around. And I think the game script is going to be in their favor.
I agree with all of your points. The one that stuck out to me and the one that I thought made this the most interesting was the Jalen Hurts of it all. So yes, I agree with your logic. It's just how much of those rushing attempts does Jalen Hurts take himself? How many of those rushing touchdowns does he maybe take himself? So I think that this one could be pretty even keeled, but I will log you in as the Eagles and we'll check back in next week.
Yes, we will. All right, Jake, any last thoughts here before we sign off for the evening?
Last week at this time, I said, just watch the games. Just watch the games. Don't check your phone too often in the first half. Just absorb the fact that we have football back on TV. I'm going the opposite this week. Do nothing but check your phones. Don't even watch the damn games. Just sit there and stare at that screen and watch those points rack.
All right. Very well, Jake. I think we'll leave it at that. As always, folks, go out, give us a rate and review. Give us 5 stars, please. We appreciate it. Subscribe to us here on YouTube. If you're happy to be catching us on the audio version of this, you can watch us live, see our faces, interact in the chat. We'll answer any questions you have live and on the air. But other than that, you can hit up my partner here, Jake, at Jake Trowbridge on the X/Twitter machine. You can hit the podcast at Drinking Fantasy, and you can hit me up at FF Dusty Dog if you so choose. And until next week, folks, may the fantasy gods be with you. Good luck next week, and keep drinking and talking fantasy football.
Cheers, FFers.